Okay, I'm wondering if you can hear me now. Yes, it seems you're able to. Sorry, please forgive me. Hi, good morning to my epidemiology shining star students. This is my first time doing this. Obviously, I've told you that before. I am figuring out, I'm trying to navigate the online landscape to be able to do this recorded lecture for you. And normally I have like a microphone. You can see it. But it's telling me that the device isn't available right now, even though it's plugged in. So, I don't know. I'm sorry if the sound is dog water for this stream. I will try and rectify that. But now it appears as if you can hear me, which is the most important thing. So good morning. Good afternoon if you're watching this at like a later time. Good evening, or forbid, good night. Those of you who are here live, which I actually have no idea how to see if there is anyone here live. Good morning. Welcome. I also want to say, just while we're doing this for the first time, either if you're watching live or if you are watching this later down the road, please give me feedback as to how these streams could go better, because again, this is totally a new medium for me to be teaching over. I'm very open to feedback about how this could be more effective for you. Really, the entire reason I'm doing this anyway is to try and streamline what's happening for all 80 of you to get the information all at once. So if you have suggestions, do let me know. Boo, boo, boo. Sorry, just let me get set up here. Going full screen. Was there anything else I wanted to say? This is like the general format. I don't like Zoom that much. Well, two reasons. I tried to do this last semester, even though I was just lecturing in person. I was letting students join over Zoom and then recording the sessions, and after about 5 weeks, literally the Canvas page was full because I kept uploading like 40 or 50-minute lectures, and so the Canvas was like, hey Marina, like you used all your megabytes of storage on this Canvas page or whatever. So then I had to start like deleting old ones, which I don't want to do. So that's the main impetus for me putting all these on YouTube. Please don't be weird and strange and abuse the fact that these are out on the general internet. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Be grown about it. And the other announcements I have that are just relevant to course administration are thank you for completing Quiz 0. I still have 6 left to grade, at least that's what my Canvas is telling me right now, so don't freak out if you don't have a grade yet and you've done it. But you are starting the course with 2 points out of 0. If you watched last week or read over the syllabus, you know that this class is just points-based, so Quiz 0 was not a graded quiz because nothing started last week formally. I just wanted to get the chance to know you, especially given the asynchronous portion of this class. I might never see some of you, so becoming familiar with you and your goals and what you want out of this course and your backgrounds is extremely helpful to me. So thank you for doing that. You've been rewarded with, right now, I guess there's 0 points and you have 2, so you have infinity % in this class, but you get 2 extra credit points, basically. Super interesting feedback I got from that as well. Last semester, again, I only taught kinesiology majors, and I will keep all of that course content that is about physical activity and is about diet and nutrition where appropriate. But we have like econ majors, we have computer science majors, we have biochem, we have anthropology, we have a more diverse range of classroom experiences that are coming into this course, so I'm very excited to tap into that, and I think you'll all thrive. Today, we're talking about social epidemiology and the social determinants of health. The social determinants of health, if you have taken Intro to Public Health or Intro to Community Health, this will be something that is familiar to you. If you have not, don't worry. We're here to learn. You don't have to know this coming in. It's my job to teach you it, right? So I will just preface and sort of say that although this is an epidemiology course, today and for the next couple weeks, we're stepping back a little bit more broadly into public health versus epidemiology, and also this is going to be the portion of the course that meets your diversity and equity in the U.S. requirement, right? So that's today's lecture. On the last episode, Some of you are probably so young that you don't remember when TV shows used to air every week. Like, you'd have to wait 12 weeks for a whole season of something. Now the streaming services, they just drop the whole season and then never make the show again, right? But when they would air week to week, like obviously this class is going to do, they would give you a little bit, like last week on X show, and they would give you little tidbits of previous episodes, not even just the last episode, but any previous episode. They would show you clips, and that would be like, oh, these are all the plot points that are kind of come up in today's episode. So we're going to do that as well. I don't expect you to have perfect memory of every single thing. So I'll remind you about what's important, and just for continuity, I want to make sure that you're understanding how things build on each other. So last week, the main thing you learned is what is epidemiology. This is the definition: the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related states or events in human populations, and the application of the study to prevent and control health problems. So when on your quiz and on your final exam, you get the question, what is epidemiology? You can copy and paste this word for word. Ideally, you'd remember kind of the bolded components, but you come here, you reference this, right? And we'll probably come back to this definition a lot, because we'll be looking at all of the different components of this definition, at least the ones that are bolded. Like today, we'll be living in determinants land, right? And we went over the 3 ways that epidemiological research is expanding. The first being examining health determinants at the genetic and molecular level. We will not do that in this course. That would be a different course entirely. It is happening, though, generally in research, so if that excites you, look into that on your own time. Whereas 2 and 3 we'll look a little bit more into, and that's why we looked at life course perspective and eco-social theory. So number 2 is the study of determinants at the societal level, and 3 is the analysis of determinants across the lifespan. Now, today is about the social determinants of health, so obviously we'll be living in the land of number 2 today. And this will begin our first unit. I'm figuring out what to title these, because really we'll be looking at different subfields of epidemiology as well. This week and in the coming couple weeks, we'll live in social epidemiology land, then we'll get a lecture on infectious disease epi, then you'll get a lecture on behavioral epi, and a couple of other things. But overall, I'm going to title this, instead of just being like survey of subfields of epi, we're going to call it epidemiology and society. Remember, this is the part that's going to meet your diversity and equity requirement as well. Again, before we step into social epi, there are just a couple things we need to know. Oh, another thing I should say. I introduced you to your TAs last week, and the reason I did that is because I'm gonna have to get up and let my cats in a lot. I don't shut my door in my home very often, but I do to do meetings and to stream. And there's one at the door right now, and she's really unhappy, so we're gonna let her in. And the other one, here. The other one is on my bed, so you can see him. Come here. Okay, sorry, back from whence we came. It'll behoove you to understand what an exposure and an outcome is. If you've taken a statistics course or you've taken a research methods course, these are probably your independent and dependent variable. Pretty much every other field, it is that. But since we're talking about epidemiology, we're talking about determinants, and we're talking about health-related outcomes, right? You'll see these referred to as exposure and outcome. And we'll see this throughout the course when we get to actually methodologically determining these measures in your 2x2 tables. It'll be your exposure and your disease or your outcome. So brace yourselves for that, and that's the sort of terminology you'll see in literature and throughout the course. So in exposure, we compare people who have a particular characteristic to people who do not share the characteristic. For example, Heavy drinkers versus non-drinkers, smokers versus non-smokers, people over the age of 65 and people under the age of 45, Cal State San Marcos students as compared to UCSD students, for example, men versus women. And that characteristic would be called the exposure. Those who have the characteristic are the exposed group, and those who do not have it are the unexposed group. So you were exposed to alcohol, for example, if you are a drinker, and that alcohol would be the exposure. Maybe caffeine intake is your exposure. Maybe energy drink consumption is your exposure. Flossing regularly, it can even be a positive exposure, right? Attending physical therapy sessions can be an exposure. And in epidemiology, we're concerned with health outcomes. That's the core tenet of epi, right? Is that we're looking exclusively at health-related outcomes. A health outcome is any measurable disease, disability, injury, infection, syndrome, symptom, biological or subclinical marker, or health state, positive or negative, right? So both insomnia or getting 7+ hours of sleep per night. Those are both health states, even though one is positive and one is negative, right? And in your book, the way that they refer to it is they just say disease. So disease in the book refers to any health outcome regardless of whether it is traditionally thought of as an illness. And the examples they give are pregnancy and physical activity. Like pregnancy, again, thought of as a good thing, but when you see in your 2x2 tables down the line that you're looking at disease and you're like, wait, does pregnancy count? Yes, for the purposes of methods, pregnancy will, just terminology-wise. And physical activity as well. Good point to make now, and we'll talk about it more in a behavioral lecture, is that a behavior can either be an exposure or an outcome, right? If we're curious about how physical activity is associated with progression of type 2 diabetes, then physical activity would be your exposure and type 2 diabetes would be your outcome, right? But if we're interested as to how living within a mile of a park impacts physical activity, I'm so sorry if you can hear a leaf blower outside. They haven't done this for weeks, and they decide the one day that I have to speak on the internet to 80 students. It's all right. So yeah, if you're interested in how proximity to green spaces, living near a park would impact physical activity, then being near a park is your exposure and physical activity is your outcome. So do note now the capability of a health behavior to be either an exposure or outcome depending on what you're interested in. And ideally, exposure should be actionable or intervenable. Intervenable is such an uncomfortable word, but we'll get to why that's important. I told you about the way that epidemiological research is growing at the genetic and molecular level. Genetic, especially exposures, are not actionable, right? We're not going to attempt to change people's genetics. That would be eugenics at the population level. So that's not really what we're concerned with. We want exposures to be actionable where possible. Yeah, more on that later. But tobacco ad exposure is associated with increased risk of smoking initiations. For example, your exposure would be seeing ads for tobacco products, vape products. So you might expect that reducing youth ad exposure could lower initiation rates. Initiation of smoking would then be a health behavior that is your outcome, right? And ad exposure would be, again, has it in the name, but that would be your exposure. So, and then the actionable part of that, right? Reducing. We're reducing. If we take this change, we could feasibly expect that relationship to, because they're associated, to change the outcome. Now, when I say intervenable, again, this is really the step back into public health land. We design something like this if we could create an intervention to reduce youth ad exposure to tobacco ads, right? When you hear the word intervention, you might think of something like this, where all your friends are standing in a room and you walk in and they tell you to take a seat and then they're gonna try and change your life. And what's the point of these, right? This isn't necessarily the type of intervention we're talking about, but the point of these is to change sort of a negative pattern in your life, whether it's something you're doing or a negative situation you're in. Maybe your boss is really on you, you're in a bad relationship, and these are your friends looking out for you, trying to make positive change in your life, and they feel like it's required. They can't watch it go on any longer. Something really bad is going on, and they have to intervene. And they're doing that with you at an individual level. Now, we aren't taking populations and sitting them in rooms. I mean, not always. Or I'd say not even often. But that is sort of the spirit, of what an intervention is in public health. A public health intervention refers to actions or policies designed to prevent disease, promote health, and improve quality of life among populations. Right? We are intervening on something that we think needs fixing. And we can build the case of why that needs fixing, and it'll give you the tools to do that throughout the semester, but you should know just what that intervention is. Interventions can, and I'd argue should, target various levels. They could be preventive, promotional, or protective. We could talk more granularly about what that means, but overall, public health interventions, by their nature, are proactive. We'll talk about the types of prevention, but really we're trying to give the population the best conditions for their health, specific to any health outcomes that they may be extremely susceptible to, or extra susceptible to, right? And the proactive nature of public health interventions differs from medicine or medical treatment. This is reactive, right? You're already sick, you're already experiencing those signs, symptoms, like we said before, disease, disability. Then you're going to the doctor and they're reacting to your ill state. So, no one's here that I can see, but we'll do the Dora thing, right? Do you know this public health intervention? If you are a student in California, I'll give you little hints. Take a look at this picture. I tried to pick a not very gruesome one. There's some really gruesome ones. Maybe that's a hint. And the fact that students in California probably could know this public health intervention. What if I told you that these are juniors and seniors in high school? Okay, this public health intervention is called every 15 minutes. And it's, that's a statistic that comes from drunk driving, is that someone dies of a drunk driving incident every 15 minutes. So the reason that they designed this, or the impetus for this, and we'll talk about this in the behavioral epi lecture as well, is people have the knowledge of general health things, right? Teens know that drunk driving is bad. People, as they get into driving, know drunk driving is bad. Even pre-drivers, children, know that drunk driving is bad. However, their risk perception of how much they think it'll affect them and their community is low. So they designed this intervention to bring up that risk perception. Something that also brings up your risk perception is then if you have firsthand experience with this. If you've then seen people you know actually die from drunk driving, your risk perception goes way up. But we don't want that to happen for people to have this risk perception, right? So in an effort of prevention, to be proactive, they design every 15 minutes. So they go to a high school, they stage a drunk driving accident with students and families from the school. Usually they have it that one drunk driver student hits another student, and they extricate the student who's the victim of the accident from the car, and they've got them looking like a bloody mess, and they take them away on an ambulance, and they do this demonstration in front of students. And over the course of days, they bring some of the students' family and friends to the hospital to see what their treatment would look like. People give testimonials about it, and then they ultimately hold like a funeral. Again, the student doesn't actually die. This is all a simulation, but they hold a funeral for that student where people talk about the impact of drunk driving. They talk about what that person meant for them. It's as if they were actually lost. So that simulation raises risk perception. So people that are less likely to drive drunk after that, or at least understand the risk that their community is in. So that is an effective public health intervention. If you go to a state school, or if you went to high school in California, you might have had this. It's likely that you've at least heard of this. The other most, in terms of health education interventions, DARE is the most famous health education intervention of all time. However, it shouldn't be. It was a huge failure, and I do feel the need to address this. So here's an example of a good one. Here's an example of a bad one. DARE was born during the time of the war on drugs. It was not based in any evidence. It really just was an education intervention. Now they have better interventions targeting the same populations that are actually administered by drug use prevention specialists and are informed by principles of harm reduction, which we'll talk about, and are also they use tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy versus just having someone come up and give scare tactics to them, right? So DARE was a huge failure, and we've seen that in pretty much every enduring study. So that's what a public health intervention is, and we'll go over more examples of what they are and can look like at every level. Okay, so that's your public health, what you need to know as we step into social epi. So as a review, this is why we told you what happened last week. This is the definition of epidemiology. Now you may be wondering, how does social epi differ from this? Great question. You just add the word social into a couple of things. The study of the social distribution and determinants of health-related states or events in human populations, and the application of this study to prevent and control socially determined health problems. You might be genetically destined to get some health outcomes. That is not the concern of social epi. Most health problems at least will have some social determination. Remember, thinking about that life course theory thing you saw last week, yes, genetics play a part, but then we'll see in a whole bunch of models and theories today how many social components are salient in different health problems for different health behaviors. So many of them are socially determined, or at least contributed to socially. And then same thing, we're looking at the social distribution. We're not looking at the genetics here. We're not looking at biological mechanisms. We're looking at social distribution and determinants. So that's what social epi is. Literally just the same definition. You slap the word social in a couple times. And for a little bit more, the study of exposures, now you know what that means, and disease susceptibility and resistance at diverse levels. Would be like, levels? We'll talk about that. Including the individual, household, neighborhood, and region. And some of the research questions that they can answer are, how do society and different forms of social organization, just think about this as broadly exposures, any exposures under this umbrella, influence the health and well-being of individuals and populations. So then this is whatever outcome you're interested in. Your exposure and your outcome. And so it studies the frequency, distribution, and social determinants of the states of health in a population. So if you remember from last week, it's okay if you don't. We're more in descriptive epi in this part. And then here we're in analytic epi. And the discipline emerged in the early 19th century. If you're really into this, after this lecture, great scientist you can look up is Nancy Krieger. She is one of the OGs in social epi, has a lot of great papers out about eco-social theory, about the web of causation, super compelling work, so she's up there. And then I've slapped the word social into the definition, but if we want to just make sure that we're on the same page about what that means as well, especially if in your writing you want to refer to any of these things. Let's get on the same page about it. Society, originally meaning companionship or fellowship, now stands as our most general term for the body of institutions and relationships within which a relatively large group of people live, and as our most abstract term for the condition in which such institutions and relationships are formed. We live in a society, right? However, I'd implore you to be as specific as possible, even though it's an abstract term, about what type of society you're referring to. Are you referring to American society? Are you referring to modern society? Same thing with culture. Qualifying sort of how these massive and broad terms will help us get on the same page. And then social, this is the word I've thrown in, is a descriptive term for society in its now predominant sense of the system of common life and is contrasted with individualist theories of society. Again, we're studying population health. We aren't a singular doctor going out to the hermit in the woods that's never seen anyone. We're concerned with the people that we are around and who are connected to the systems that we engage in, right? So that's what we mean by social. And then societal serves as a more neutral reference to general social formations and institutions. And culture and epidemiology predominantly refers to a general or specific way of life, whether of a people, a period, a group, or humanity in general. With this, that's a lot of options, like I said before. Qualify it where you mean. If you mean a modern U.S. culture, say that. If you mean a culture pertinent to a community, say that. I think we have some more definitions. Yes, we do. Social class and socioeconomic position. Again, if you've taken a public health course, you might have heard socioeconomic status. We have a couple of econ majors, maybe you've heard this too. Social class refers to social groups arising from interdependent economic relationships among people, and is determined by a society's forms of property, ownership, and labor, and is premised upon people's structural location within the economy. Just take this for what it is. If you're referring to class, know that this is what you're talking about. And then socioeconomic position. In turn, is an aggregate concept, so more broad, that includes both resourced and prestige-based measures as linked to both childhood and adult social class position. Resource-based, we're talking about material and social resources and assets, including income, wealth, and educational credentials, versus prestige-based as an individual's rank or status in a social hierarchy, evaluated with reference to people's access to and consumption of goods, services, and knowledge as linked to their occupational prestige, income, and educational level. So, minute differences there. The difference is that both are included in socioeconomic position. Now, the term socioeconomic status, you'll hear this a lot. You'll see it even abbreviated a lot in a lot of papers. Arbitrarily, if not intentionally, privileges status over material resources as the key determinant of socioeconomic position. And this is somewhat of an important distinction. However, if you continue to say socioeconomic status in your papers, use terms that you know what they mean. I'm not going to ding you for that, but position is much less fixed than status. Status is a hard thing to change versus position. You can change someone's socioeconomic position by giving them material resources as a potential intervention, right? So using that term socioeconomic status is like, oh, well, this is an unchangeable thing, when in fact, if it's a key determinant of things, and we'll look at that, position can be changed depending on resources, right? Just some food for thought. Okay, history lesson. Well, not really. Just we're going back in time to the birth of social epi in the US regarding social relationships and health. And so here we're looking at a study, one of the Alameda County studies from the Human Population Laboratory. You probably don't know what these numbers mean yet. Relative risk ratio and mortality. You don't even have to know. Mortality just means the risk of dying or rates of dying. Okay. And relative risk ratio, we'll learn that. So I'll just explain this for you now. If you took the ACT science section, you could probably figure out all of this. On our x-axis, level of social integration, we go from low to high, and it's got a couple ticks in between. But toward the right, we're getting high social integration. You've got a whole bunch of besties, the community's tight, right? Over here. And then here, we're more hermit in the woods type deal. And our Y is age-adjusted mortality rate. So obviously you're more likely to die if you're old. So we're looking at mortality rate fixed for age. And here is we're living forever. Obviously no one is. And then here is higher mortality rate, higher risk of death. And let's just focus on Alameda County because this is up north, this is in the Bay Area if you're not familiar. And I think it's an easy one to interpret and our thickest line. As social integration increases, your risk of dying decreases. That is to say, social relationships benefit our overall health, right? The biggest metric of population health is mortality rate in an area. So, social integration, helping our overall health. 2.44, it means about by double. So there you go. That's what that means. And you can see what that looks like among different populations. And from this paper, I won't make you read the whole thing because it is a little dense, but here's what's important. Some people are like, oh, well, people are self-selecting into their level of social integration. It is also to say that maybe because your health is better, you are able to be more socially integrated. So biology and personality must and do affect people's health and the quantity and quality of their social relationships. They're not disowning that. They're not disowning or discounting the fact that, yeah, people's innate personality or biological imperatives may fuel their level of social integration. However, research has established that such factors do not explain away the evidence linking social relationships to health. They go on to say that social relationships are a function of broader sources: employment, marriage, faith communities, institutional affiliations, and just, I want you to think about all of these later and what this collection of terms is, are all determined in part by their positions in a larger social structure, right? We're talking about this, right? That is stratified by age, race, sex, and socioeconomic status. Again, not going to dig in for saying this. This is still true. And we'll talk about this stratification. I think it is next week. So that is what they knew. This study came out down here, you can see, in 1988, and these studies are from the 60s. So they've knew this for decades. For decades they've known this, right? And so what are we left with today? Is that loneliness is a current national priority. I don't think that Vivek Murthy is our current Surgeon General. I think he was the second most recent. I'm going to look that up. Oh no, he still is. So this is your current Surgeon General. If you are watching this as a recording, which I'm assuming that most of you are, feel free to pause right now. And go watch. I should tell you what to do before I tell you to pause. And go watch this. I've linked this to your Canvas, this video. It's a hot little 8 minutes. We could watch it on stream, or I don't really want to like YouTube a YouTube video, so pause and go watch it. He goes over the mechanisms and kind of the conditions that lead loneliness and social isolation to lead to mortality risk. He like talks about mental health. He talks about diabetes and physical activity, I think. So go watch that. He's called it a national priority, and I'm inclined to believe it. Also, he wrote a book together that came out early pandemic that I think is wonderful. If you are interested in this topic, don't feel like you need to read it, but if you're all about loneliness, if you're intrigued by the prospects of social isolation, there's that. So loneliness and social isolation are different. Before, remember, we just had social relationships. Now we're looking at a couple different components of that. Loneliness is a subjective sense that one's social relationships are deficient in quality or quantity and perceive a gap between their actual and desired relationships. Now, I could be married, have 8 siblings, live in a home with my parents, be on 8 sports teams, be in a classroom all the time, be affiliated in Greek life. I could be surrounded by people. I could be never physically alone and still feel lonely. That's what it means by it being a subjective sense, right? And then social isolation is the objective lack of social relationships and social contact. I could ask you, how many people do you feel like you could go to for support? And if that is less than 7 or so, you may be socially isolated. Certainly if it's 0 or 1, you may be socially isolated. And then social contact. Again, this was a huge burden during the pandemic, and he touches on this during the YouTube video if you did go and watch it. How often do you talk to the people in your life that you just said? If you gave me 5 people that you feel like you can go to for comfort, but you only talk to each of them 1 day a week, social isolation. So that's the objective measurement of social relationships and social contact. And then here we can actually measure both of these things, right? I just gave you examples of how to measure social isolation, but this one, I am unhappy doing so many things alone. I have nobody to talk to. I cannot tolerate being so alone. I lack companionship. I feel as if nobody really understands me. These are measures of loneliness. We're not asking you what your proximity is, spending time with people, how often you talk to your parents. We're getting how you feel about the people around you. And if you have that sense of having someone to talk to in companionship. So that's loneliness, right? And why do we care? I've just told you what these things are. It's because social isolation and loneliness has effects. I do this is spelled correctly because we're talking about the noun. On mortality risk. This, you'll learn what a systematic review and meta-analysis is broadly later down the road. You'll also learn what a cohort study is later down the road, so maybe we can look at some of these. But in a systematic review and meta-analysis of 90 cohort studies, so they took data from 90 different studies and combined it to include over 1 million people in an analysis. That's a lot of people. So any patterns they find are probably not by mistake. Found that both social isolation and loneliness are significant for both sexes with mortality. With all-cause mortality, with cancer mortality, I think cancer is number 3 or 4 leading cause of death. I think it's bumped down to 4. And then CVD is still your number 1 cause of death. Is significant. These things are all related. They do increase your mortality risk through some of these mechanisms. Equivalent to smoking, and we'll talk about later how to calculate these risks and that they can be compared, but they just put this in language that might be familiar to you. Because people know, right, how smoking contributes to death. So this is their reference point. Equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes per day by some estimates is the harm of being lonely and being socially isolated. Now, this is sort of a rough and tumble table. It's kind of a quick and dirty table. But from that paper, social isolation is increasing your all-cause mortality risk by 32% and loneliness by 14%. And both of these, some of your leading causes of death, are both getting combined to contribute to this, right? Social isolation increases your cardiovascular disease mortality 34% through lots of mechanisms, right? If you watch that video, through mental health, through stress, through physical activity. But again, mortality is our end-all be-all health metric, right? Of people dying preventable deaths due to isolation, due to loneliness. So that's why we care. Now, we could just throw up our hands, but you've learned what interventions are now, right? You see something negative, you're sitting them down, you're making the change. So interventions to mitigate loneliness, and just to begin thinking about, get your gears turning. When you see negative things, negative associations and health outcomes, start trying to brainstorm what levels and how we can intervene. So they've got these, again, Office of the Surgeon General, 6 pillars to advance connection, all great. I think that these are good things, but these are kind of not super concrete intervention components, whereas these are. But here are your suggestions. To strengthen social infrastructure in local communities. Love that. Fund your community organizations, promote social connection, establish and scale community connection programs, invest in those local institutions that bring people together. Love it, chef's kiss. Enact pro-connection public policies. Yep. Mobilize the health sector, of course, you gotta say that. Reform digital environments. Now, again, if you watch the YouTube video, you kind of know this too. Not to sound like technology is bad and Thomas Edison was a witch, but it is true that social media privileges quantity over quality relationships, right? So they support the development of pro-connection technologies. They're not like, oh, kids need to get off their phones, right? They're trying to develop pro-connection technologies that promote connection versus just the isolating feeling of scrolling and having the anxiety. Different class for a different day. But requiring data transparency and establishing safety standards as well. I'll just jump over here. And technology training. It's not that they don't want us on social media, it's that they want to give us the tools to use it in a pro-social, pro-connective way. This specifically, they're thinking about the elderly so that your uncle on Facebook isn't just shouting into the void, and that they're using it for actual connection, advancing social connection, right? There you go. Deepening our knowledge, obviously we just need more research on it, and building a culture of connection. This is sort of a product of, if you do all of these things and all of these things, the culture will just change. It's hard to target culture in one intervention, right? So, some concrete ways to do that is changing cognition. For example, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Like we said with the replacement of DARE, usually interventions based on this have an effect. Social skills training and psychoeducation. Now, the moms in Florida aren't going to like me saying this, but we do mean social and emotional learning here. They are interventions to mitigate loneliness. So if you want your kids to not die sooner, social and emotional learning might be a good idea. Social support, which is its own, we'll talk more about that. It has a theory. Group activities, for example, arts and gardening. Atul Gawande actually blurbed this book. I don't know if you can see that, but Atul Gawande, author of Being Mortal, blurbed this book. Now, I read Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. I read it during my master's. You don't have to read it if you don't want to. If you do want to, cool. And the only thing that I remember from that book is a study. I might be misquoting this, but the essence of that study is they had 3 nursing homes. Being Mortal is like end-of-life care, right? They had 3 nursing homes. One they just did nothing to. Another, they gave all the old people birds. And then another, they didn't do anything in the nursing home itself except they put a daycare and playground next to the nursing home. Very few landscapes in the U.S. environment, at least, include nursing homes right next to elementary schools, for example. But group activities, like a garden that was shared, or socially assistive pets, even robots. I mean, people are doing robot studies about this, but giving the old people birds, prolonged life for those old folks in Being Mortal. So that's what I mean by group activities. It's, either in youth settings, honestly, even in college settings. I've talked about the elderly and how both the elderly can benefit from these things. However, the population that's most plagued by social isolation and loneliness is our generation. Is the young under 30s. Young people will bear the most mortality risk from social isolation and loneliness. So yes, we're concerned about the geriatric population, but we also need this. Games and activities. Go play cornhole. Prolong your life. And technology training, like I said before, teaching folks, especially the boomers, how to use technology in a pro-social way. Okay. I'm thinking about if I need to take a break, but no, we could do it. We'll go through the theoretical applications of social epi. So we'll do this every week, at least for the first unit. There will be theories that matter. You don't have to remember all of them. Again, use these slides as a reference. I'm not trying to trick you by giving you the slides and telling you that you can use them on quizzes and stuff. So use these as a reference. But theories we care about. Because without hypotheses that can be clearly supported or refuted, without having a clear understanding of the temporal, that means like in time, what happens when and what follows, sequencing or biological plausibility, we'll go over this as a tenet of causality as well later, and without articulated theories and specific concepts to guide empirical investigation, we will not be able to make progress. It's a quote by Lisa Berkman. Theories, models, and frameworks tell us where to focus and why. What determinants do we care about? If they are social, we need to do social epi. Gives us a framework for logic and inference. If we expect things to be related based on a theory, model, or framework, then we can collect data and test that and make inferences. If we're just doing things willy-nilly, then we don't have a logical hypotheses, right? Or hypotheses founded in logic. Can illuminate and mitigate confirmation bias. Yes, you can find associations and things. However, if you use a theory, model, or framework that posits that multiple things might be related or multiple things might confound a relationship, and we'll go over what that means later, You want to make sure to measure all possible exposures or all related to what you're interested in, so that you're not just strengthening the association or disproving the association just one. I'm assuming that you know what confirmation bias is from ever taking a rhetoric class, but it's just you have a hypothesis about why something is occurring, and you just add evidence to that sole hypothesis versus looking at other reasonings. So you'll see how theories, models, and frameworks look at a broader echelon of things that might impact development of a health outcome. And theories, models, and frameworks are an integral part of the scientific process. Consider theories, models, and frameworks to all be the same thing here. The most important one, we'll come back to this, is the social ecological model. If you've taken a public health class before, if you've taken community health, probably you've seen this. And so when we talked before about, levels, we talked about interventions on different levels. These are the levels I'm talking about. The social ecological model is sort of layers of an onion, and has these all occurring within each other, and can help us understand the multifaceted and interactive effects of personal and environmental factors that determine behavior and contribute to health, and emphasizes the multiple levels that affect health. Now you can see the individual occurs within an environment. And of course this isn't, we live in a society, right? This shouldn't be too big of news for you. However, the legacy of public health is focused a lot on an individual and trying to affect individual change. But because the individual does not occur in a vacuum, if you have barriers at any other level, it becomes difficult for an individual to operate or make that change if these barriers, like the barrier just stops here and the individual cannot change. So your intervention may have to target multiple levels. If you can think of factors on different levels that are barriers, they could also be facilitators. But if you can think of barriers on multiple levels, think of an intervention that targets all of those. And then these arrows. When we say something is upstream, we mean kind of distal to the individual, and downstream is more toward the individual. So policy development is upstream of individual change. Just if you're going to use that language, that's what that means. And in fact, we see this a lot in obesity research. There have been decades of obesity research that have targeted solely individual change and have failed, because now we know that it is best practice for things to be multi-level because there are barriers on other levels. Very few health outcomes have barriers solely on the individual level. And this is something that you might encounter as you go into physical therapy, as you become behavioral therapists, as you become personal trainers, as you become therapists, as you become psychologists. Is that you will be tasked with changing an individual, but that individual is not operating in a vacuum. Okay, let's go over the levels a little bit more concretely and give you more examples of interventions. Obviously, like I said, the individual level focuses on the individual intrapersonal characteristics that influence behavior, such as knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, and personality traits. This is also important. Knowledge. Knowledge is individual. If you propose a classroom intervention that improves people's health literacy and teaches people how to cook, still you're trying to improve people's knowledge. Knowledge is individual. If your mechanism of change and what you're changing occurs with individuals, then it's an individual intervention. I don't care that you got people into a room together. Sure, that's community delivery. But if you're only trying to change knowledge, that's an individual intervention, right? Example of this would be a public health campaign that educates individuals about the harms of vaping. I'm pretty sure this is called The Truth. This is what they're doing. They know that vaping is associated with depression, so they call it Depression Stick. And then they give you ads before all your YouTube videos, and that's an individual intervention. Interpersonal then involves relationships with others and can include friends, family, and peers that may influence an individual's health behaviors. An example could be a dad and me cooking class. That's what we see here. Yes, they're getting skills, but they're also strengthening social support together. That's interpersonal. Or support groups for cessation of substance use. Especially because they have mentors. Things like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous are interpersonal. Is they are strengthening by their coming together and sharing, right? They're not just getting lectured to and changing what they know. They're building a community. They're building interpersonal relationships to stop using substances. So that's interpersonal. Anything that has to do with friends, family, peers. And then institutional or organizational includes organizational characteristics. Think of institutions. Think of organizations. A business as an institution. A university as an institution. Such as workplace culture, policies, and structures that can affect health behaviors. In my undergrad, we had to take an entire class about this, and we learned all the modalities that workplaces can implement to promote wellness. A lot of the big fancy corporations have like wellness branches where they have like yoga instructors that teach throughout the day. They have flex time. You can show up an hour early and take a long lunch to do a Pilates class or whatever. They have $1,000 stipends that you can spend on either like gym memberships or sporting equipment. You could buy your pickleball paddles with your company funds if they prioritize your wellness. And then we have, standing desks. Sitting is the new smoking, they say. So standing desks. Holding standing meetings. If you can bring your little tablet and walk around together. Working out on site. On-site cooking. I mean, some of it is a ploy to get you to stay at the workplace longer, but a lot of it does actually promote wellness. And because quite often corporations are the ones to provide your health insurance, they do have other motives to promote your wellness, right? So, but these are some of the workplace policies. Not that I'm saying that's a horrible thing. Those are some interventions that institutions, right, organizations can implement to promote your health. Also, putting a disc golf course on your college campus. I told you last week one of my favorite ways to move is disc golf. And then I was teaching at Markstein Hall, so I park and then I just walk into the lecture hall, and I taught at like 5 p.m. so it was dark all the time. And then one day I came early and I walked to the library and I was like, that's a disc golf basket. So Cal State San Marcos, go throw a disc. And then, or if your university puts on a fun run or 5K, I asked my students last semester, I was like, why don't you guys do that? And they were like, Marina, have you seen the stairs? And I was like, yeah, I guess that's right. So here's UCSD's Fun Runner 5K, right? That's an institutional intervention to promote institutional wellness. Okay, I've belabored that. Community, again, it can be both. Community delivered interventions can be community interventions, but think about the element of change. If you're trying to partner with a community organization, you're giving resources to that to strengthen the community. That the level of change is at the community, right? If you want to put walking paths in your school, that would count. Encompasses relationships among organizations, institutions, and informational networks. An example would be creating bike lanes to encourage cycling, painting them green for better visibility, developing community gardens to promote movement and increase access to fresh produce. And so here's one. And then policy. Oh, excuse me. Gotta stretch. Refers to local, state, and federal policies and laws that regulate or support, can be either. Public health kind of gets a bad rap because a lot of public health policies are limiting, they're restrictive policies, but they also can support healthy actions, like giving people health care. In practices for disease prevention, early detection, control, and management, we will have a whole separate lecture about health policy, so we're just talking about the model for now. But an example of a policy, probably famous ones, are legislation that bans smoking in all public places, on restaurants, planes, for example. What TV show is this? I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's Queen's Gambit. And they are smoking inside because it's like the 20s or something. So, obviously now that's outlawed. You are not allowed to smoke within like 50 feet of a building. And then here, you still see this on the planes, and now they've qualified it to include vaping, is that it's a felony to tamper with a smoke alarm in the bathroom, and federal aviation regulation requires that you cannot smoke on the plane, and they give you the same spiel at the beginning of every flight because it's required. So those are laws. Eco-social framework. You might remember this from last week. Now, I just want to draw parallels between this and this. This has a little bit more operationalized examples of what is happening here. Like social relationships, that's the interpersonal level. Living conditions can encompass both community, institutional, and interpersonal. Neighborhoods, communities, institutions, social and economic policies, right? They're just qualifying a little bit here. Whichever helps you to understand different influences on health, you can refer to. And this, of course, also has environment baked into it, talks about how, yes, all these things can impact your health, but also the health of the population overall, and that life course is baked into that. Any of these can be accrued or improved over the life course. And again, these are downstream, and these are upstream. Upstream, downstream. Now, if you are concerned with, and you will have to write papers about certain health outcomes and certain exposures that you might be interested in, right? See if you can think of risk factors, or what would be risk factors. Oh. Sorry, my computer just switched it up. Yeah, we're still good. See if you can brainstorm risk factors on every single level of the eco-social framework or the socio-ecological model if you don't have the time. And then see if you can think of, and you could kind of skip these. And also think about if you can intervene, what an intervention would look like. Type 2 diabetes, for example. What are the individual risk factors? All behaviors live right in here. What about all of this? What things in any of these levels can impact one's development and progression of type 2 diabetes? So there's your challenge, because you will, for your Unit 1 homework, have to talk about health disparities and talk about multi-level factors and interventions. So start letting that be food for thought now. Social support theory, I mentioned this before, but here's what it means. The main tenet of social support theory is that it posits that support reduces the effects of stressful life events on health. And if you like flowcharts and you're a visual learner, here's what that looks like operationally. There are a few different perspectives, but I think this is the best to introduce you. This is the stress and coping perspective. Is that stress impacts your health in many ways, heart health, weight, things like that. There are lots of biological explanations for how stress at least influences many health outcomes. And that receive support, if you're helping me out, I feel like I can cope with the stresses in my life and that they won't negatively impact my health. So in this way, it sort of buffers. Coping and receive support buffers the impact of stress on health, right? That's what that's saying. Whew. And what sorts of forms of support exist? Now, I made this little graphic during the first semester of my PhD when I still had hair, so this is me, just so you know. And these correspond to these. So emotional support. I could sit down, have a little kiki with my friend, and divest how I'm feeling, get emotional support, and that will buffer my stress. Right? I could live with the stress, or I could have a friend help me process my feelings and work through. 2 is instrumental support. Here's my friend giving me a ride. Instrumental support is like what we consider to be domestic labor. I'm working hard, my friend comes over, does my dishes. My friend gives me a ride to school. My friend watches my kids for me. I don't have kids. Things like that. Those are instrumental, that's instrumental support. Tangible shit is being done for me. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't swear. 3rd is informational support. My friend isn't, giving me a ride at this point, but they're telling me how to get to school the fastest using public transit so that it saves money for me. They're telling me what hours they're at the food pantry and that they have frozen salmon right now. They're telling me this class over this class that I should register for next semester to not add to my stress, right? Informational support. Support if things are being told to me that can help me in my life. And then appraisal support is a little bit of all these above. It's sort of the conjunct or inverse of loneliness, is when I think about who I have in my life and the people I have around me, I don't have to wonder if I am supported. Is my level of perceived support. Of, do I feel supported by this person? Do I feel supported by my network overall? Are there people there to do these things for me should I need it? And all of these things, even just the knowing that there are people there, even if we're not doing 1, 2, and 3, all can buffer the impact of stress on health. Now, obviously, this might not be true for every health outcome, but then we use theories, right, to measure all these things and see if it is true for different health outcomes in different populations. And of course, I've drawn these all with different people giving me support, but these forms of support are not mutually exclusive and may easily coexist in one relationship or exchange. Mimi, hey. I might have to let her out. Okay. And in application, I waxed on about the importance of theories, etc., but they're only as good as when we test them or apply them. For those of you Kinese majors, I found this one of physical activity. They adapted an ecological model, right? So you can see they're multi-level. At least this has influences from social ecological model. They've got individual, interpersonal, and then they jump way up. They've got policy. It seems like they combine institutional, organizational, and community, which is valid. And then they go to what policies impact these things, and then they even go global. They spell cultural wrong. That's actually kind of funny. And they also have how this occurs over the life course. This doesn't really correlate with this table, but they do just include that these things can happen over the life course, right? And so that's their adapted ecological model for the determinants of physical activity. And you can do this for whatever your behavior or outcome of choice is. Like I said before, if you're thinking about these things and listing risk factors on every level and what interventions would look like at every level, that's what scholars are doing. That's what this is. So, they have, why are some people physically active and others not? Individual is all right here. And then there's all this other stuff, right? You can't be ignorant of all this other stuff. Having social support, being around people that support you being physically active, even do it with you. Oh, I need to let her out. Sorry. Mimi. Here. There you go. Yeah, being in a culture where my undergrad, man, I went to Cal Poly SLO and everyone was at the rec center. Having it be a cultural norm that you're hitting the rec center at least a couple times a week is more likely to influence you to believe that exercise is a value, right? Seeing others active, behavioral modeling, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. And crime, traffic, incivilities, right? If I don't feel like I can walk outside, even if I want to, if it ain't safe for me, I'm not going to do it. These things can be barriers or add. Having a nice neighborhood to walk around in, you're much more likely to want to. Living in a positive natural environment where the air is clear and it's nice influences your ability to perform physical activity. Now, then think of someone in your life. Of course, all this stuff as well. Think of someone in your life who you've tried to get engaged in physical activity and maybe have failed, or at least tried, but it's hard to get people from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation, right? Think about what things on this list might be at play for that person. That's all. I'll just leave that food for thought. So there's your model in application. Organized sports sector too. The reason that high school to college is a hard transition is because most people don't have organized sport the way that they did in high school too. Okay. Yeah, Yeah, we can power through. Now we're in our last little bit about the social determinants of health. Okay, you might have heard this before if you've taken a public health class ever before at all. If not, we're learning together, right? As defined by the World Health Organization's Commission on the Social Determinants of Health, it's defined as the conditions and the environments where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age that affect a wide range of health, functioning, and quality of life outcomes and risks. Right? This builds naturally on what we just learned. This is sort of basic bubbles if you like little Canva style little logos. I'm thinking about economic stability, education access and quality, healthcare access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context. If you're interested in the interplay of all these things, this is the WHO's 2010 schema of how the social determinants of health operate to impact equity, health, and well-being. I think about these things a lot as barriers, right? Or at least that's how I've talked about them. And they are important determinants. They can also be leveraged, right? When thinking about vehicles to design an intervention upon, these are the things we need to consider. Where people are born, the neighborhood you're born into. Can we change that at the macro level? How should we be designing future neighborhoods that people will be born into? Are there micro level changes we can make to existing neighborhoods to improve them so that people are born in safer environments? Schools, what needs to change in schools to promote health? Workplaces as well. I've told you good workplace things. And it might not just be wellness interventions. There are things that we need for safety at work, right? The quantity and quality of work. Play, always need more of it. Worship, right? Worship spaces are fantastic for building community values. Can that be leveraged to be health promoting? And if so, how? And age. As you grow older, things change and you are accumulating risk. And we should be mindful of how environments should look to promote healthy aging. Yeah. Reference this if you find it useful. Okay, and so now I've been telling you this entire time that the social determinants of health are important and that there are very few health outcomes that are solely genetically determined, and you're like, sure, Marina. Here's the soup, basically. The social environment impacts mortality disease, and if I haven't convinced you of that yet, here you go. I'll let you sort of chew on this. Income, obviously, you know what that is. Annual income. Social network index, we've talked about this a little bit. Sort of social networks are the vehicle for social support. So do you have a network that's connected? Do all your friends know each other? Do you get support that way? And integration, like I said. And then ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. That's things like your parents getting divorced, violence in the home, child abuse and neglect, lack of access to education, right? Those are ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Ever wanting for food, experiencing food insecurity as a child. So they're just counting those. And then, again, mortality is our end-all be-all metric of health in a population. And then disease, you can look at the different diseases that they're looking at. Colorful for you. And what do we see with mortality? Lowest income to highest income here. A difference of $65,000 a year. Being low income will take a decade off your life. You were going to live to 80? No, you're poor. You're living to 70. You really living to 70 and you're poor? No, you're living to 60. Having a less integrated social network. I only have 3 friends and they don't talk to each other. That'll increase your mortality risk by half. And then ACEs. This is sad, right? This is intergenerational shit. Because now we're all grown and we can't change this retrospectively for ourselves. However, we can change this for the next generation. Is that experiencing 6 ACEs as compared to 0 will take 2 decades off your life. And also, all these things, all those negative exposures, increase risk for all these negative things that you can see how they do that. So, that should mean something to you. But in fact, you are prolonging your life right now. Literally right now. Literally, if you're doing your dishes, if you're, away from your computer, listening to me like I'm a podcast, you are prolonging your life right now by earning your bachelor's degree. I'm assuming that all of you are earning your first bachelor's degree. And congrats, it's prolonging your life. Through educational attainment, you can see how it varies for men and women, and this is in the US I'm referring to. You're going to increase your lifespan, men, about 4 years, and women about 2 years. So age 25, I'm about that. I get 60 more years of life because I'm a college graduate. I'm living to 80. I mean, not me individually, but population metric, people of my demographic with a college degree, we're getting 60 more years of life. If I hadn't gotten a college degree, probably less, right? And you can see how much less. That's as of 2006. Now, this is 1997 to 2014, but if you're about 18, you're also going to get 60 years of life. If you get a master's degree, that increases. Now, you're putting 4 years on your life by finishing. And by even having start to finish, you'll put 7 years on your life. You're like, awesome. I'm earning this degree, prolonging my life, and you should feel good about yourself. I hope that this is affirming that this endeavor is worth it to you. If health is your value, this is good. And also, if you think about this on a population level, it is a little bit sad, and here's how I mean that. Follow-up question is, how are you prolonging your life right now? Yes, a lot of you are kines majors. Yes, a lot of you are psych majors, and you are learning things about how to attend to your physical and mental health, right? What you learn that will benefit you in your career, and in fact, you'll be able to apply it helping other people promote their health, is helping yours. That's not the main it's not the main mechanism through which your life is being prolonged by you getting this college degree. Yes, it is one avenue. Your educational attainment in health-related fields promotes your health knowledge. Literacy is a real thing for some populations, but not the most important here. Coping and problem solving, and then that promotes all these things. Well, doesn't promote smoking, but helps you deal with all these things, and leads to better health. And this is from your reading. Evidence is accumulated, however, pointing to socioeconomic factors such as income, wealth, and education as the fundamental causes of a wide range of health outcomes. Right? You're like, but Marina, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg didn't finish college and they're rich and gonna live forever. Shush. Income, wealth, and education are the fundamental causes. What is having a bachelor's degree correlated with? What is it a proxy for? That is increasing your life. Yes, knowledge is one thing, but then it's going to impact your earnings at work. The safety with which you work, how you feel at work. This is how you're going to spend 8 hours a day for the rest of your life. These conditions and the reward that you get for doing it greatly impacts your health. Right? Also will buffer your stress, or just not be a source of stress. And then same thing here. This is sort of the prestige element of socioeconomic position, is that you'll be more socially connected. We've talked about that. You'll be of a higher social class, and you will both believe and have control over the situations that you're in. So yes, education is doing all these things, but it's also income, wealth, position that are fueling your health. So education is getting you these things by proxy in addition to teaching you knowledge. So these are, I'd argue, the more important. I do think that this is in order: income, wealth, and education. There you go. And that is a little sad. I'll sort of let you unpack your own feelings about that, but we live in a society where, if you believe that people have a right to healthcare, that people have a right to health, do you think that's true? I'll just let you chew on that on your own. What are the conditions we've created for people to pursue optimal health? Okay, some examples of social determinants of health. Just want to give you the language to do this. Food deserts and food swamps. You may have heard this before, again, if you've taken a nutrition class or a public health class. Those of you who have not. These are important terms, and you can think about the neighborhoods around you. We'll talk more about place in the coming weeks as well, and see if you can relate anywhere that you've been or have lived to this sort of thing. A food desert, you may have heard this, by the USDA, Department of Agriculture, is defined as areas where people cannot access affordable and nutritious food. Now, this can be very broad and just be like the earnings of the area are not in line with the grocery store prices. More operationally, if you're trying to use it as an exposure variable, it can also be defined as a low-income tract with at least 500 people or 33% of the population, whichever is more. So if my population only has... If I have 6 people in my city, even though that's 33% of my population, it needs to be at least 500 because that's more, right? Living more than 1 mile in urban areas or more than 10 miles in rural areas from the nearest supermarket or large grocery store, right? 7-Eleven that has a cabbage in it doesn't count. We're talking Vons. We're talking Ralph's. We're talking Costco. Need to be accessible. And if not, that's a food desert. Oh, sorry, I'm stretching again. Now, food deserts are somewhat of an older idea, but food swamps are a very new idea, and Ronald McDonald not going to like me saying this. Food swamps are geographic areas where the overabundance of high-energy foods with poor nutritional value inundates food options. And more operationally, it's areas with 4 or more convenience stores or fast food chain restaurants within a quarter-mile radius of a person's residence. If that is what is most available to you, you are living in a food swamp. Things can be one, the other, or both. If you're living in like a very trucker town and all this and no Vons, you're living in both a food swamp or a food desert. You can live in a food swamp that isn't a food desert. You can throw Safeway in next to your Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, McDonald's, El Pollo Loco, Jack in the Box. It's still a food swamp though. So, just food for thought. And think about these as exposures. These are things you can search up. Now, close to home, housing and sanitation. This is, we live in a high cost of living area. I just struck last week to try and get a salary that helps me secure housing in this area. On the other side of the spectrum is our unhoused community members, right? Hepatitis is entirely preventable. Hepatitis is spread through like needle sharing. It's also spread by not having access to clean water. Like not being able to wash your hands after you use the restroom and dry them on a clean surface increases your risk for hepatitis. Literally like feces and pooticles increases hepatitis risk. So, the trope gone but not forgotten. Here's the inverse, forgotten but not gone. Learning from the hepatitis A outbreak and public health response in San Diego. This is published in 2019. We were like, oh, dang. Post-vaccine era foodborne outbreaks, sanitation initiatives. They're like, hey, totally preventable outbreak, sad, but it seems we've all forgotten about this. And then it happened again. Obviously, our unhoused community members were hit harder by COVID due to spatial orientation, but also due to sanitation, they had a co-occurring hepatitis C outbreak. Very sad and very preventable. Could have been prevented by access to healthcare, stable housing, sanitation. Literally on my street corner, they have, if you've ever been to a music festival, they have the gray sinks that you foot pump and they have paper towels. That makes a difference versus washing your hands and drying them on your dirty pants and you've been outside, right? So very sad, preventable, happening in your backyard. Okay, and then a term I'd like to bring your awareness to, also an emerging idea. It's now just been recognized by the WHO and sort of not at the degree that I'm going to talk about it at. I had a lot of fun with this slide, folks. Is the commercial determinants of health. In fact, if you think about all these things, commercial determinants influence a lot of the social determinants of health. These are private sector activities that affect people's health. I have some marketing majors. Sorry. Ronald McDonald not finna like me saying this either. Either directly or indirectly, positively or negatively, companies shape our physical and social environments. Now, I have exclusively negative impacts here, so let's talk about it. This one, if you are aware of what's happening here. The Stanley Cup trend, all the girlies are getting their Stanley Cups at Target, and now it's been discovered that they have lead in them. And Stanley is saying, hey, yeah, our cups just, they have the requisite amount of lead for other insulated cups, and it shouldn't be accessible because the bottom is vacuum sealed. But then it's a whole bunch of people showing the bottom of their Stanley Cup eroding, and then that is exposing them to lead. So if you have a Stanley Cup and the bottom is eroding, I mean, do what you're gonna do. It might contain lead. So that's news happening right now. If you know what this is the Panera lemonade that kills you. So it's actually called the Charged Lemonade, and one of these, I think this is the small size, has like 300 milligrams of caffeine, and they had it in like the self-dispense things, and just had like, Charged Lemonade, and then they had the caffeine content lower and small, and they don't have any warnings about that. So one guy drank 3 of these and died in his car, and someone about your age who had a heart condition drank 1 and died. And they talk about kids drinking these not knowing. So it's caffeine in portions that nature did not intend. And now, right, they don't have them in those free dispense things. You have to go pick it up from the counter. Did they change that because they value people's health? They were so sad that people were passing away. They recognized this as a public health problem? No. They did it to mitigate risk. So think about also the motivators through which commercial entities, private sector activities, what their priorities are, and who needs to advocate for what. This is the Octuple Bypass Burger at Heart Attack Grill in Las Vegas, Nevada. The fact that it's named after a health condition and the major surgery that would be needed to repair it, and probably is the entire caloric requirements, I mean more so than for one adult in one day. Should they be stopped? This. Right now I'm listening to Empire of Pain, and it's doing great at educating me about this. The Sackler family were in the FDA's pockets, and with Purdue Pharma, got people addicted to OxyContin, knowing full well that it was addictive, and insisted that it would not be, and now we are still dealing with the opioid epidemic. The legal battles have ended. The Sacklers basically got a slap on the wrist and are all in the Bahamas. But millions of people have died of the opioid epidemic. Possibly you've lost someone. I don't mean to be insensitive about that. It's still the leading cause of death in white men aged 45 to 54, especially in Appalachia. And then what are these? I do kind of give up the bag by including the news headline, but my partner was like, oh, those are just highlighters. No, these are vapes. And I saw on Reddit the other day, what inspired me to include this is someone found one in their middle schooler's bag. In their middle schooler's bag. A 12-year-old, okay? 12-year-olds are getting access to vapes because, yes, they've outlawed marketing toward children, which, not to be, a whole bunch of fun at parties, which I think is a good thing. They've included flavorings in that. Now, it's not a marketing ploy necessarily, but they have this discrete thing. Who is the main population that has highlighters? Any of you own a highlighter? I mean, I do. I'm not gonna lie, I do have highlighters. Being in a school environment. But how old was I when I bought those? Predominantly, minors are using highlighters. And who would need a discrete form of smoking? It's still targeting, even though it's not through the advertising. School-age students. So, there you go. There are your commercial determinants of health. Now, last semester I asked, the reason I put all these, last semester I asked my students, what do you think the most salient commercial determinant of health is in U.S. society? Throughout U.S. history, what do you think it is? Tobacco sort of is one, but actually public health has done a great job of assuaging that. We are losing the battle to vapes, and I think that's something I'm happy to talk about and we'll touch on throughout the semester. Big Pharma is one. And I think both of these are places where the FDA deserves some scrutiny. Fast food is another one. I have just waxed on about food swamps and food deserts and that. However, I think that the biggest commercial determinant of health that I think is touched on every single one of these is car-centric society, is the automotive industry. Oh. Go back. Oh no! Here, wait. There we go. Okay, can we regulate? My friend just texted me this. Just because I was talking about the profit motives in Panera, continuing tensions between individual rights and public health do exist, and we'll discuss it in a coming lecture. I think that the biggest commercial determinant of health is the automotive industry, and has been for a long time. Because, think about it. I wish I had you all in a classroom, and I would ask you to raise your hand if you get in a car. The name, oh my. Hi, Amy. Sorry, I just saw chat again. If you get in a car 5 days a week or more, I would ask you to raise your hand. And think about this too. If you don't get in a car at least 4 days out of the week, you're probably a dorm student. And if you're not a dorm student and you don't get in a car 4 days out of the week, how? We've created a landscape that is really reliant on cars. Built environment cities can be designed to move people or to move cars. You've probably seen this before. That this is about 60 or so people. They can all fit in one bus and take no space and get there really fast. Or they look like this in terms of movement of cars. And then if you wanted to walk in that neighborhood, how much longer will it take if the bus needs to go one place versus span the whole car span? Thinking about, I was referring to the heart attack burger. Yeah, I think it's called Heart Attack Grill in Las Vegas, and it's called the Octuple Bypass Burger. So, go at your own risk. This is Rockridge, California. Think about this next week. We'll look at California Healthy Living Index. Great little walkable neighborhood. You can walk to a Trader Joe's and back. You can walk to a BART station. You can walk to a coffee shop. There is decent parking, but that's not the priority, right? Oh, hi, mark of approval. Oh my gosh, all these chatters are coming in right now. Hello. We are getting toward the end of lecture, but I really appreciate you being here. So there's Rockridge. There's your demonstration of people in space. In automobile optimized transportation system is this. That's the academic way to say car-centric society. I drive every day. Yeah, I would be shocked if the majority of my students don't drive 5 days a week or more. Versus public transportation. And then this is your walkable neighborhood, right? This is the converse. Say I'm here, I'm looking at this picture, and I want to go to McDonald's. I would have to get in my car despite the fact that it's 100 yards away. There isn't a crosswalk. These are freeway entrances. If you were this van and you wanted to get to the Quiznos, you can see it. It's not that far. You'd have to get in your car. That's what we mean by automobile optimized transportation system, your car dependent. You could jaywalk, but that's not legal. It's also scary. Good luck. Speaking of which, if any of you know why this is here, I'd also be shocked if you knew where this was. I'll tell you. This is San Luis Obispo, and I had a friend who was a city and regional planning major, and she was like, you ever go downtown and see the textured crosswalks? I was like, the textured crosswalks? She's like, yeah, they just put those in. They're brick. These decrease pedestrian accidents. They decrease like cars hitting pedestrians. Because you see something as a driver, you see that the texture is different, and you're going to understand that your car goes like this, and it's kind of like a speed bump in that way where you might F up your suspension. Probably not, because it's not an actual bump, but you're inclined to slow down when you see that difference. more than if you just see a regular crosswalk that's just over asphalt. So, textured crosswalks obviously need to be implemented on the built environment level, but decrease motor vehicle accidents, right? So in terms of activity-friendly community design, mixed land use, look at this. You've got stores, you've got apartments on top. Now we're sort of taking this a little bit too seriously and getting a lot of 5/1s in those modern apartment buildings that all look the same. You probably know the ones I'm talking about. Connected streets versus this. This is the converse of that, right? High residential density, that's where you see the 5/1s, but also Manhattan. Manhattan has high residential density, is extremely walkable. The most walkable neighborhood in the United States. And access to parks and recreation resources. If you're curious about this as an exposure, it's obviously beneficial for a lot of things and is also a correlate of a lot of things. These recommendations come from this study, Expected Net Effects of Built Environment Attributes on Non-Communicable Diseases, this is like chronic diseases, and infectious diseases. You might think, safe neighborhood promote walking. It'll also impact the spread of infectious diseases. During COVID, we started caring about that seriously. So the only things that are unfavorable is that if you're in your car, obviously you're less likely to get COVID from other people, but your movement, automobile optimized transportation system has completely separated physical activity and transportation. If you lived in a safe biking town, if you lived in a walkable community, physical activity and transportation could go hand in hand. Us relying on cars has divorced those two things entirely. Amy says, my friend from Europe visited and said how Americans hate walking, and then we walked to the corner store in LA and she understood why we don't walk more often. Bars. That's so right. I have a Vaughn's a mile or so away, but it just sucks, and I can't even listen to my audiobook with my noise canceling headphones. I'll do it, but it's tough. Versus here, so idyllic, and you can say hi to people you know on the street, and you're fostering community. Like we said, that's important. You get that social connection by just seeing people on the roads. Versus doing this, and you're dissociating, and you're listening to your podcast, and you're not making eye contact with the person in the drive-thru when you get your food, right? So this study, residential density is favorable for all these things. Non-communicable diseases are like chronic diseases, so thinking type 2 diabetes. Infectious diseases, probably the most common is COVID that you'd think of. And open streets. Anybody a fan of parklets? Y'all remember the parklets from COVID? Parks, trails, open spaces, favorable for both. Pedestrian and bicycling facilities, like I said, combining transportation and physical activity, favorable for both. Public transportation, obviously unfavorable for infectious diseases. Now we have masking, and that's more popular, right? And not all infectious diseases, too, I'd say. Even for the respiratory ones, yes, your risk is increased, but there are other metrics you can go to within that. And then here, highly unfavorable for movement, mixed land use, favorable, versus living in the suburbs and then needing to go else place to shop, and then residential density. So that is what I believe throughout American history is the biggest commercial determinant of health. I'll let you self-reflect and think about how that impacts your own life and if you agree. Okay, that is it for lecture. Key messages. Health is determined by by social factors than individual behaviors, especially on a population level. Social epidemiology helps us understand determinants of disease at multiple levels. Loneliness and social isolation are salient threats to health in the Anthropocene epoch. Requiring intervention, which now you know what that is. Applying theory helps us understand what and how determinants interact. The social determinants of health show us factors outside of an individual's control that will impact their life expectancy. Education is a key predictor of life expectancy. It is a correlate for income and social position. And many of the most impactful social determinants of health are, in fact, commercial determinants of health. Woo! Okay, this was almost 2 hours, but that's all and then we have get ready for the next episode. You know, at the beginning we did what did you miss last week, and so here will be what I need from you going forward. The quiz, I think I've already published it. It'd be wild to have done it before I even lectured, so it'll be up there. Keep working on the Jamboard. I'll close it and go over it and make sure that you have everything I want you to have on that Jamboard, the historical figures one, on Thursday. And if you are a Kines major and my in-person enrollees, I'd love to see you in activity on Thursday. We'll do introductions, so I'd at least love to get to know your name. Please come this week. I'd love to see you. If obviously you're a remote enrollment, asynchronous online, you don't have to come. You did quiz 0. We'll chat here as well. Now, I've been live for almost 2 hours. I will stay for questions for the duration of time it takes me to do my New York Times puzzles for the day. If you are watching this remotely, or the recording, I guess, you can click off now. I'm just going to do the puzzles and answer people's questions. That probably isn't beneficial to you. Feel free to email me with questions, okay? I'm going to pull up the Wordle. And if you care to do these on your own, don't watch this, but I'm just going to do my daily puzzles with you. Wordle. Okay. Let's choose a word that is relevant to what we just said. Let's pick the word drive. So during this time, if you have questions about the lecture, about the course, please feel free to direct them to me. I'm here for questions. Okay, what did we get? Just one E. Let's do... Here, wait. Knight said thank you, and Amy said thank you, have a nice day. Perfect. Let's do lemon. How interesting. I really want to figure out where this E goes, so we're going to do sleep. Oh, how interesting. I am glad that we did do the double E. So then the L is probably here. Probably ends in L. Unless it's... No, that wouldn't make any sense. So let's guess something, something, something. Something E, P, L, E, P? No. Where did we said the L was at the end. I would do the word repel. Okay, where's the other E then, actually? But we don't have R anymore. It probably starts with E. Expel. That's what it is. Okay. And just note that I would never do this to any of you. Okay, let's get up the connections. Or maybe we'll just do the mini and then we'll end. Connections can take a long time. I went to mini. Oh, I did this one yesterday. No, let's in fact do the connections. All right. Herald is a news report. So is the Sun, Register, and Chronicle. I'm gonna assume that these are all newspaper type deals. Yeah, newspaper names. Croissant, banana, moon. These are all like shapes. And sickle. These are all going to be like crescent shapes. Yep. And then pound, hammer, slam, and bang. Those are all the same thing. And then, what are these? Power-ups in Super Mario World. Feather? I don't know feather. Well, that was quick. Okay. So that's the sort of thing I'll do. I'll stay for questions for a little bit, and if not, that's okay. Okay. Bye, Epidemiology Shining Stars. I'll make sure that this is uploaded for students to watch the recording, and I'll see you on Thursday or next week. That was an impressive Wordle. Well done. I'm a puzzle fiend. Thank you for the lecture. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate y'all. I'm here for questions, and take care.